Welcome to Junkyard Theory, folks. Today's episode is a very special one. This is a two-part episode. We're going to talk about the costumes of Dune. We've never before, talked about filmmaking in relation to any movie specifically. It's always been more generalized, but this time, thanks to good folks over at Warner Brothers, we've got a two-part episode over here with the costume designers from Dune. And right now in the studio with me, I have Bob Morgan. Bob, how's it going, man?
I'm well. Thanks so much for doing this. I'm delighted to speak with you.
Glad to have you on board, sir. Bob, I just want to start off, with congratulating you guys. Amazing job on the movie. Been waiting quite a long time to see the cinematic adaptation of really, how do you call it? An amazing cinematic adaptation for contemporary times. And you guys pretty much nailed everything. I got the book somewhere back there. Yep, there you go. Got the book there. So whatever I read, you guys surpassed expectations. So yeah, want to talk to me a little bit about how the project materialized and how you came on board Dune.
I too will share with join you in your desire to see this as a wonderful film experience. I've been a fan of the book since I was a young man, and really was waiting and kind of, I think like a lot of us were wanting to see a proper homage paid to that amazing material. It was kind of a strange experience, not a strange experience, but it was unusual in that I was actually slated to do another show, and my dear friend Jacqueline West, who was my co-costume designer, called me and said, I've been approached to do Dune, and I said, well, that's amazing, and she said, would you? It's so big and it's happening so fast. Would you consider co-designing this with me? And I said, let me think about it. Yes. So it didn't take much to convince me. And then finding out it was Denis Villeneuve made it just that much more special. I was a huge fan of his work of Blade Runner and Prisoners and of course Arrival, which I think I saw 3 times because I thought it was just so brilliant and sensitive and such beautiful storytelling that it was very exciting to come to this project. And that's how we started. We started in Los Angeles, even though the film was going to be shot in Budapest. It became very obvious very quickly that we needed to kind of divide and conquer. And so I jumped off to Budapest, and we were kind of doing Zoom before there was Zoom. So we worked in 3 different countries. Jacqueline stayed in the United States for a while. I went to Budapest. Denis was in Montreal and then on to Budapest. But we worked remotely like that before COVID, before Zoom was becoming such a necessity. It was our necessity to make this happen.
Talking about the scale of a movie like this, you guys are globe hopping
Yes.
as well. So yes. And so many people like you and I both echo the same thoughts. We've been waiting to see an adaptation of this for a long time. The book has a massive fan base, and living up to those expectations. Yes. What were the unique challenges of costume designing for a film on an epic scale such as this?
Well, you say it best. It was the epic scale. It was an epic scale, and you really nailed 2 things there: the epic scale of this, and people's expectation of what this would be. And it is a very high bar when you look at the book and the source material. I mean, it was the original. I mean, all those great films came from this. Avatar, Star Wars. All those, were kind of gleaned from Frank Hebert's book. So he was kind of the original master of this story, of this world building story. That was then, copied and copied beautifully, but he was the master. So that was I would say the challenge. It was that We wanted to be true to the book, true to the material, but also create something that was beautiful, believable, that you forgot you were looking at a film and started experiencing those worlds. And that was the real challenge. Logistically, we work all over the world, and I've worked many places in the world, as has Jacqueline. And so that part was not so difficult or daunting, but it indeed was the epic size and the amount of time that we had to make these worlds.
I'm pretty sure that you guys managed to pull this off because of the dynamic between you and Jacqueline West. So I'd like to hear a bit more about this. How did the two of you? So Jacqueline called you and talked to me about how you guys bounce ideas off of each other, maybe little challenges where you guys didn't necessarily see eye to eye. Did that happen? And how did you guys take the project from start to finish?
We've worked together for many years, and we're very good friends. We've always had a very kind of symbiotic relationship, and we've worked in different capacities. I worked as a costume supervisor for Jacqueline before, but she's an artist and an art historian. I'm an artist and an art historian. I'm a painter. I still paint and have paintings in my gallery in Los Angeles. And so we approach in a very artistic way, and we have deep respect for each other's artistic ideas. There weren't really challenges. We both kind of honor each other's creative process. And I think, if one of us felt strongly about something, we would say it. And if the other felt strongly about something, we'd say it. And usually we would all come to the same kind of point of agreement, in that we would look at something and say, yes, this is the way to go. But we're always open to, saying, well, what if we change this like this, or do this like this? And, if one of us felt strongly about something, we really just kind of made that happen. And there was never a push and pull. It was always a give and give. And I will say too, we have this amazing, I have an amazing concept artist, Keith Christensen, who I had introduced to Jacqueline, and years ago on another project, and she had worked with him as well. Keith Christensen and I go back to Man of Steel when he was very new, and he helped Michael Wilkinson and I develop the Superman, the reimagined Superman suit, and Keith and I have been friends for many years, and so he was kind of the third spoke in that wheel, in that he is incredibly creative. He is incredibly immersed and loves this Dune, and he's kind of a walking Dune encyclopedia. So he knows, like, backward and forward the material. So that combined with what Jacqueline and I saw, and then of course I would have to say Denis' vision, which is incredibly clear and incredibly collaborative. He had a very distinct idea of what this film was, and all the department heads, Patrice Vermette, the production designer, and Donald Moat, the hair and makeup, and the set decorators, and we all kind of worked in concert. There was like a Bible created that we all worked from, and that Bible. I'm veering off your question a bit, so you can pull me back in.
That's totally fine. I'm just like absorbing all of this.
That Bible, was our guide. It really was a Bible, so to speak, to help us in this creative process. I mean, the beauty of Denis is that while he told us what it wasn't, he also told it what it was, and that created this amazing framework that allowed a huge amount of creativity in between those 2 points, to explore what it might be. Of course, again, the source material is the guiding light in this. And
Were there
Frankie,
any places where, sorry to interject, but were there any
no,
places
please,
where one,
please. I'll just keep
were
talking.
there,
So just go ahead.
that's totally, this is so fascinating. Were there any instances where, he set about certain guidelines, but you guys come up with stuff that's probably outside the norms of what he's established, and then he factors that in? Was the collaborative process kind of like that, or did you guys like always play within the scope of what you guys were given?
That's a difficult question to answer, because we created over 2,000 costumes for the film, and so
Wow.
there were so many decisions and Denis loved being involved in every aspect, from color to shape to style to, in Budapest, we were literally across the yard, across the pond. There was a pond in the middle of our ego studio. His offices were one, like, I could see him from our office and he could see ours. And he frequently would just come over and say, I'd say, Jack and I would call him and say, do you want to see something? And he'd say, yeah, I'll be right there. And he'd run over, and he was so excited to come and be involved. And he'd say, keep me involved in the process. I love to see the color, the finish, the aging, the style, the cut, and he was so collaborative in that way. To say it happened a certain way each time, I couldn't really say that. We would take what he was thinking, or he had some material that he liked, and show us a photo or a drawing, or say, gosh, I really love the way this looks. And then we would take that, and Jacky and Keith and I would take that and interpret it and kind of hand it back, and yes, but more of this, or no, but more of that, or yes, exactly that. Or, it was always different with each costume. But as we developed the four worlds, and I would call those four worlds the Atreides when they were on Caladan, and the Iraqians when they were on Dune, the Harkonnens on Yeti Prime, and then the Sardaukar. And those four worlds, as you kind of define what the color is, the feel is, the history, the what is the story of these people, it then became easier and easier with each costume, because it followed in a world, if that makes sense. It's like, once you decide that the Caladan world, we knew it was a green, lush, rich place, old aristocracy, old money, old tradition, with this very rich, wet planet. Then we decided to do like a deep, instead of black, doing like a deep bottle green, which almost appears black on screen, but it's a deep bottle green for their dress uniforms, kind of reminiscent of like the Romanovs, very this old dynasty. And so then we riff off that, so then the work uniforms come off of that, and the army comes off of that, and and for each of those worlds, then we built from that story. So the same was true for them, the Iraqians, for Harkonnens. So all those worlds, once that was defined, we were able to define what each of those costumes were.
Gotcha. And
more of an answer than one.
that's
edit it well.
Let's say killing multiple words with one stone. With regards to Frank Herbert's novel, like you stated, it's like the father of all space epics, and modern I'd say contemporary sci-fi films have this the design from costume to production to the entire art is more sleek, and it has this futuristic kind of vibe to it. But in the world of Dune, you go kind of I guess a little bit backwards. You bring there are no computers. It's more, how do you call it? It feels more analog. It feels more analog, and factoring that into the design and bringing in inspiration from various other cultures. Does it kind of feel like history is repeating again, like in the future in terms of costume as well? Like what we have nowadays in terms of fashion, it's evolved into something, but at the same time while bringing in elements from our past as well.
As a painter, and I used to be a clothing designer as well, and I don't think any of us can help in the creative process, looking to all the experiences you had and everything you've seen when you start to create something new. I had an art teacher one time tell me, this amazing painter, she just passed away this year, Rita Abbey, and she said to me, "You will never create anything new. There is no new color. There is no new line. It's all been done before, and it's all been done in nature if it hasn't been done before." And I kind of always take that on. Tell me, repeat that question for me again. Let me just hone in on this a bit better.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry, that's okay. Start over on that.
Yeah, I kind of twisted it a little
that's all right.
weirdly, I guess.
I went far afield.
No, what I kind of wanted to know is, what's the whole, bringing in elements from the past and setting them in a world that's set in the future.
Right.
Was that kind of like more intentional, or
Right.
did it like materialize organically?
Let me do. Okay, I'm my brain back on track. You know what? We never considered this a science fiction film, and to be honest with you, Denise said, there won't be any spaceships, there won't be any aliens, there won't be anything like that. So we've always thought of it as this passion tale, this epic adventure, and really we looked thousands of years in the past to go 10,000 years in the future. And you're right, you do see elements from like North African tribes, like the tribes of Morocco and Templar Knights, and we looked at both past and present. With the Harkonnens, we looked at different artists like the Harkonnens, and we looked at like Geiger and bug parts, very organic kind of things like that, and just different things, and that really made it feel more historical in a way.
Gotcha.
And what you said about it was a very organic place. There were no computers. I mean, if you read in the book, I think one of the very opening lines was that they had made computers illegal. I think when the book opens, she starts speaking about that they had gotten rid of computers because when the computers were thinking more than the humans, then that was a dangerous thing. And so even the still suit works by mechanical action. It's the pumping action of the heels and the motion of the body that makes it work. There is no computerized LED panel in the still suit. There is no electronic component to it. It is strictly mechanical. And we looked at things like we didn't have any buttons or zippers on any costumes. Like none of the closures or zippers or buttons. There are earth magnets that hold together like the shirts when the shirts open, which proved to be a plus and a minus, because sometimes we wanted to stay open and it would automatically go and close again. So we had to kind of take some of the magnets out, like with Jason Momoa. We wanted his shirt to be open and have that very romantic look. He'd lean over and stand up and it would go. So it added down, but you're very astute in noticing that we really set out making costumes that were both from history and had a regal feel about them, and had a depending on the world, like for the Kaladins, very regal, for the Iraqian, very purposeful. My philosophy for costume design, for art, for clothing design, and any design really, is that the form always follows the function. And so you, number one, need to believe it really does live in that place and there was a need for it. And so I think that is my kind of truth sayer of costume design, is form following function. does it make sense? Instead of putting something on someone and then saying, well, how do we make this make sense? Well, no. The process is reversed. You say, what would you wear in this environment? What would you choose to wear? How would you choose to appear? What would make sense for the geography or the situation you find yourself in? And that's my approach, and that's what we did on the film.
That's what I was kind of going to ask you next. Functionality versus aesthetics, and you kind of answered that question already.
Okay. Well, sorry.
That's fine. I want to know a little bit more about the Fremen still suits, because with regards to what you just said about form following function, in a desert environment, like, you have the still suits which are darker than the sand, and how does taking a look at that, and like the camouflage, isn't that kind of like I feel like there's a disparity, but I'm pretty sure you guys have had an answer for that, like why you did that.
We had a drawing that Keith had done even before we were on the project of this still suit, and it was this beautiful stone gray. And as we looked at when the location manager went to Jordan to scout, I asked him, I said, please bring back samples of the sand, because we knew it was different colors in different places. Sometimes it was very gold, sometimes it was very beige, sometimes it was more red. And we wanted to get an idea, knowing that this was going to be covering everything, because it is literally like having everything sandblasted. When you stand in one of those sandstorms, and you close your eyes and cover your mouth and cover your eyes, and then when it's over, you're just have been massively dusted in this beautiful patina. But what we saw from Jordan was that the color of the rocks frequently is this very kind of stone gray that has this wonderful sand patina over it. And so that made sense, that the still suit was this color that stood out, but also was easily camouflaged and easily aged into that color. That was also the necessity of the robes and the head wraps, and was that we added these layers of gauze and thin fabrics, like the Tuareg tribes did in Morocco, to both add protection, eye protection, breathing protection, but also added camouflage over whatever they were wearing. And that was the reason for that color. Number one, it shows the sand so beautifully. When that sand patina is on it, you see it. You see it almost enhances the suit even more. It gets into the crevices. It gets into every little crack. It gets into, it's like this wonderful, wonderful aging and patina that happens that you wouldn't see if it was the same color as the sand. You wouldn't see that wonderful aging.
That makes sense. Sense. Thanks for clarifying that.
Oh, sure.
And I mean, you guys designed costumes for like the full range, from aristocratic noble wear to tactical Fremen still suits. So with such a massive range of costumes to create, and a very limited time frame, what did you guys focus on the most? And was there any costumes that you wish you could have had more time to work on?
You always wish you had more time. You had more time, but the great thing about creating, where you has to be, you have an end date, it's going to shoot on this date. The great thing about that is it does kind of aid you in coming to a conclusion. And to answer the first part of your question, the still suit probably was the very first thing we started working on. We knew it was going to be the most complicated in that, it had to be believable. It had to be wearable in many climates. It was going to be worn on a range of sizes, everything from Timothy and Rebecca to Jason Momoa. So from, one size to giant size, and needed to look good. And needed to look good on every one. It also had to do the stunts. and be movable and stretchable and retain its beauty and its shape through. We shot in it on stage in Budapest. We shot out in Jordan, in the Sahara Desert. I mean, it was in every climate. I used a lot of the technology that I have learned on many past films, Superman, X-Men, a lot of films I've done in the past, to bring that practical technology to this suit that made it comfortable. We created a sandwich of layers of fabrics that were wicking fabrics that pulled moisture away from the body, that kept the actor comfortable. The base layers were natural fabrics. There were cottons and 4-way stretch cotton that was then overprinted, to add the textures and different things and tricks we've learned over the years of creating different kinds of movable suits. Jose Fernandez at Ironhead was incredibly.
He designed the Wonder Woman costume. That's him, right?
Yeah, I did. Well, he didn't design it. Michael Wilkinson did, but he fabricated.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman and the Batman in Batman versus Superman. X-Men. I'd worked with him many, many times. So he worked on the original sample of the still suit. We took the drawing to him, and he and his amazing cutter T2 at Ironhead and their amazing team created the original sample and prototype for the still suit. We then took that. We knew we couldn't build it in the United States because we were working in Budapest, and just with the timeline of having actors come and work, 3 weeks later, it was just going to be impossible to make them in America and then bring them to Budapest to fit. So we created a factory, and in-house, David Bethel and Rachel and Helen and all these amazing cutters and fitters made these bespoke suits for each actor. Each one was different. Each one was custom. They had different properties depending on if they had to stretch more for stunts. And that's what we set up to do. It was about 125 pattern pieces by the time we were done. And it took about 2 weeks to make each suit. So we realized we had to create this city and these 4 factories to manufacture these in-house. And that's what we did.
Gotcha. One final question.
Sure.
What skill, not necessarily related to costume design, did you find that, help you in designing costumes for Dune specifically? Like from other walks of life, what other skill came in handy when designing costumes for Dune?
So many skills. I'm always a student. I'm always learning, and I think keeping myself in a position of always learning from the people around me that we've brought in, the amazing artisans, Matt and his team that dye and print amazing fabrics. I think willingness to learn has been my greatest tool, and the willingness to change when things are not going a certain direction, the willingness to stop and turn a different direction, and not keep chasing something that's not working. And I think that training comes from my parents and my teachers over the years, and that adaptability comes in handy. I could say, my training as an artist was part of it. I tell you, having done every job you said not in costumes, but I would really tell you that I've done every job in the costume film costume industry, other than cutting and sewing, because I'm not a very good sewer. My grandmother taught me to sew, but I'm pretty awful at it. I'm pretty shit. I can sew a button on, and I know how it's supposed to go together. I'm just that it is not something I've become an expert in it. But I really had done every job from, starting in a costume house to sizing clothes, to, aging clothes, to working with actors, to working on set, to, painting clothes, to dyeing fabric. I've really done so many of those different jobs, being assistant costume designer. And I think that I often say, if you really just turn around in your life and look backwards, and you'll see the progression of where you've come from. And then you will realize that every experience you had, and I don't like to label them good or bad, but every experience you've had led you to where you are now. And I think that was incredibly true for Dune, as I did call on all of those past experiences, both dealing with people and crews around the world, and how to make an army of people head towards one goal, and all those things came into play.
Fantastic answer, and I'm pretty sure Frank Herbert would be really proud to see what you guys have accomplished with the movie.
That's a tremendous honor, and thank you for saying that.
Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to do this episode. It means a lot.
Thank you, and I look forward to seeing more of your work as well.
I look forward to seeing more from you, and special thanks to Sophie from Warner Brothers for hosting this session. Welcome to the second part of the Costumes of Dune episode, and we've got Jacqueline West here in the studio. Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Jacqueline, gotta say, first of all, congrats on making Dune like the movie that it is. For years, people thought this was unfilmable, being the grand space epic that it is, but you guys pretty much nailed it. I was just telling Bob the other day as well, and we're here to listen to your side of the story. So when Denis approached you with Dune, it's like sci-fi has not been your territory when it comes to costume designing, and this was like I said, like this massive space epic. And did you feel daunted by the idea of taking it on? And if so, just walk me through the process.
First time he asked me, I said no, because of that. I said no, and he had loved The Revenant, and said he just had to have me. And he circled back around the second time, and I, was talking to my husband and my daughter, and they said, "You have to do Dune." Oh my God, I can't believe you turned it down. And then, so I said yes, but it was daunting for me. And I have done a lot of big period pieces, but never really sci-fi, done retro-futuristic in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And Bob had never designed a movie, but he'd supervised for me several times, and he'd done a lot of specialty costumes in films. And so I thought, I need to bring Bob in on this. So I did, and we did it.
And working with Bob, like I've heard his side of the story. I want to hear what was that dynamic like? The two of you were designing costumes this time for something that was like massive. I guess you guys had more than 2,000 costumes created for the whole film, and you guys were globetrotting. So talk to me about the whole the logistics of making something like that possible.
Well, we kind of leapfrogged. I would stay in Budapest, and he'd go check on the specialty costumes being done in London, and or he'd jump to Jordan, and I'd work on everything that was next. I did most of the designing, and Bob did the logistics.
And when it came to designing a film like Dune, which, like you said, is retro futuristic, how do you think everything that you had done before, like you said, you've done period pieces. How did the experience and the skills from all of those films translate into something like Dune?
Well, I know period. I was an art historian at Berkeley, and I count on John Berger is one of my favorite art historians, and he said, to see the future, you have to go to the past. And so I did. And I created this look that I called medieval right off, and Denis loved it. And I used a lot of medieval references for it. I thought of Dune as a world starting over completely after the apocalypse. And so I really relied on the past. I did a lot of research with painters from medieval painters. I pulled from Giotto for the Bene Gesserits and for the Spacing Guild and the Avignon Papacy, the Templars for the Atreides armor, the Golden Tarot and the Marseille Tarot for the Bene Gesserits and for Mother Mohayam, which is a combination of the Queen of Wands and the High Empress from the Marseille Tarot. And so I used a lot. I really looked I used everyone from Goya to Giotto to Caravaggio for inspiration.
And Bob mentioned that you guys were focusing mostly, on the Fremen still suits, but during the whole pre-production process, if you were to take that as a full complete timeline, how much time were you able to spend oscillating between costumes from like all the different characters, and which one kind of was your favorite design?
Well, this will probably sound strange, but my very favorite was Peter de Vries, played by David Dalsmatian. And I think I took that from, I was inspired highly by Bergman on that, the Seventh Seal. But he was a human stiletto and kind of crossed with a praying mantis. So I love that costume so much. But
certainly, yeah.
We had to divide our time, definitely. I set up a lot of displays for Denis because I also come from the fashion industry and I love displaying stuff. I had my own department in Barney's for years in New York, and they would fly me out just to display the whole clothing line. So I love doing that. So right away when I got there, I got a bunch of mannequins and I dressed the Bene Gesserits all in layers of black, every color black I could come up with, silks, and wrapped them and draped them and put a big wind machine on them for when they arrive at Caledon and with Mother Mohayam. And then I brought Denis in to see it. And he really loved it. It was spectacular. I played music and everything.
Oh.
So, but while we were designing the soft costumes, we were also setting up a factory within our warehouse to manufacture the still suit. But Keith Christensen did the first drawing of it that Denis absolutely loved. And then we took it to Jose Fernandez at Ironhead here in Los Angeles, and he did the first prototype. And he's an incredible sculptor, artist, and one of my dear, dear friends. And he made the first prototype, which we then took to Budapest and set up a manufacturing kind of one table did all of the hard pieces and another did the actual patterns for the form-fitting undersuits, and another area of the warehouse worked on the face masks and all the tubing and the head piece. So we really did set up a factory. We had about, I'd say 80 people working on the still suit, and each one took about 2 weeks to make. And they were all bespoke and form-fitting for each actor, because we had Rebecca Ferguson, who's I think 5'4", and Jason Momoa, who's 6'5". So each one had to be, of course, made for each actor. and each one was handmade and all assembled together, kind of on the actor in the fitting.
Wow. And how many iterations did you guys technically go through to come to that final design where you're like, right, this is what we're going to go with for on screen?
I think we did. I think a lot of sketches had been done before we came on, and Keith somehow nailed it. I'd say he did 4, and Denis picked the one he loved the very most. Denis has a visceral reaction when he loves something. He says, I deeply love it, Jacqueline, I deeply love it. And so once you get that deeply love it, you figure, okay, we're going with that.
Gotcha. You mentioned, that you formed this narrative in your head where the world was starting over after like an apocalypse. And did you also have some sort of a narrative for the fabrics that you guys used to create the costumes? Like where did these fabrics come from, or narratives?
We sourced them from everywhere, from France, from London, from the US. I actually found the lace for the very Goya-esque dress that Lady Jessica wears. I found that here in Los Angeles. It was a very modern take on a maha, a Goya-esque maha. It was lace, but when I brought the piece back to where Keith was drawing for me at my LA office here, he said, wow, that lace looks modern, it's just incredible. And so though it was a medieval kind of body for the design, the lace was very, very, looked like something from Japanese runway. So we sourced fabrics from everywhere. I got fabrics from Siam, fabrics from, I guess even some we found in Budapest, but we really sourced the fabrics from all over. I'm really a fabric person because, as I said, I used to have a clothing line, and I'm Italian, so the touch of a fabric means everything to me. And how it drapes, how it falls, how it lays on the actor's body. So we treated all of Lady Jessica's clothes like couture. And I had a cutter fitter in Budapest who was absolutely extraordinary. I felt like when I was working with her and actually pinning all of the clothes on the actors, I felt like I was working in the Dior atelier in Paris,
Jessica's costumes, they, it's not like you have the whole royalty vibe, but without being too over the top. Like she's referred to as a concubine in Dune. And how did you manage to get that perfect balance where it was not too royal, but right there in between?
Well, I felt to be a concubine, she had to be alluring. And she was also a nun because she was a Bene Gesserit. For me, they were the nuns of the universe. And also they were the moral compass, of the whole thing. They were the conscience, so to speak. So I thought she had to be a bit ethereal. And I used Giotto for inspiration for her. I think there's very simple, long, elegant lines in the Giotto paintings. And they're mostly for saints and nuns and priests and that kind of, but also John Berger, who I've always been obsessed by, said that Giotto, there's only two painters that would be filmmakers, and it would be Giotto and Goya. So I thought, okay, I'm going to let them dress Lady Jessica with me and channel them a bit. So I did, and I felt that would give her that edge of Goya would give her the from all his Maha paintings, both naked and clothed. If I drew from him, she would have the concubine aspect of her character. If I drew from Giotto, she would have the Bene Gesserit and the more regal side of her character. But you're right, it's nice, very astute of you to have seen that, at least my attempt at doing it, of a balance for the concubine, nun, queen.
That's a good hyphenation to with fabric. So the question that I kind of asked earlier, I think one part was kind of unclear. did you formulate any narrative as to how people on Arrakis and on all these planets, how they would acquire the specific like why would they have clothing made from this specific fabric? Did you guys formulate like a narrative in your heads?
Well,
as to that,
I used a color coding, but mainly it was the drape of the fabric to give that thing. I didn't worry about, I figure all of these planets are quite self-contained with workrooms and servants, and they would have weavers, and they would have people who could source fabric, just like like we have on our planet. There's sheep for the wool, and there's cotton for the cotton, and I'd read Dune, years ago when I was a student, and Frank Herbert doesn't really describe the costumes. He describes the still suit in minutia, but the clothing he doesn't. He gives you a mood, and I think I just had to stay in keeping with the mood. And I think if you don't do anything that's too jarring or take anything that takes people out of the story, you're okay. People aren't going to worry about where did Lady Jessica get the lace. She would have lace makers, she'd have a province on her planet like Lyon, that specializes in lace or Nîmes, I think that if you aren't overarching, you're not going to get those kind of, critiques.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper, which is why I asked you.
It's mainly more color coded. Like Caladan,
Gotcha.
their costumes were dark and kind of, the uniforms were green and wool. It was a cold, wet planet. And, on Caladan, the clothes lighten up. Her wardrobe becomes spice colored when we were doing all them coming off the ship when they were on Arrakis. I made them kind of all spice tones.
Gotcha. And designing the Baron's costume, how much of that was like a blend of CGI, if at all, or was it like entirely practical? And what other factors did you guys have to plan for?
Well, one of my early conversations with Denis, he said, "How do you see the Baron?" And I said, "Well, I've never dressed a 400-pound man before." And he said, "Well, what would you do?" And I said, "Well, I keep thinking of Marlon Brando in Apocalypse, of Kurtz in Apocalypse." And I said, "It's, I know I knew Francis at the time. I knew he almost had a nervous breakdown when Marlon Brando showed up, twice his size and in a black muumuu. And they kind of went with it, And I said, well, I kind of see him like that, and until he's in his actual, which I think we only see a quick pop of him, but he actually had
a fat suit.
He had Harkonian armor over.
Armor on it. Okay.
The Swedish people who made his suit for David Mowat sent me a maquette of his body on a stand, and we formed the form-fitting molded armor for the Harkonnens on that suit. But I also used it to make all his soft, kind of drapey, muumuu-esque kind of things that he wears. And he loved those baronial silks so much. He never wanted to take them off and put on his armor. But he was funny. He would walk around the set in just the suit. And one of the DP's kids was visiting from Australia and said, "Daddy, there's a naked man walking around." But Stellan was he's Swedish, and he was totally, it didn't have private parts and all that, but it was a naked suit, but he just walked around in it. It was quite fun to see.
I remember reading up an article where he was asking for more nude scenes.
Yeah.
In the film. Yeah.
He loved it. He just walked around in it. I figure, he likes being naked. But the silks kind of were inspired by Brando, and Denis kind of, we realized we were on the same wavelength, because he said, "Exactly, Jacqueline, exactly, that's how I see him too," So we had both thought of Brando.
Awesome. Why are there no future buttons in the future?
You read that. You're cheating.
I did.
I just, buttons seem so, I mean, when I even look at medieval clothes, there's no buttons, you know? And I thought buttons would just take me out of the time, you know, buttons and zippers. I remember once seeing a big period film and I saw a zipper, like it was, you know, I think Greco-Roman times or something, and I was, oh my God, you know. And I think I don't want this. I don't want to see zippers and pull people right out of the time period, or this nebulous time period of 10,000 years in the future. I just felt that zippers and buttons wouldn't make it. And I had done a preliminary superhero suit once for Ben Affleck, and I used rare earth metals to actually Stephen Norrington, who directed Blade and The League, who was a good friend of mine. He had told me to use all rare earth magnets to close everything because it would be easy release. And so I had the idea to use that to close the clothes instead of buttons or zippers that would take the place. And magnets have a nice, I don't know, weight and feeling.
That makes sense. I was wondering, like, okay, you have the scenes and everything. How are these costumes holding up together? And then I came across the article and I was like, okay. So I need to ask her this question.
Well, that. I hope I answered it for you.
You did. Form versus form and function. So functionality versus aesthetics. What's your take on that when it comes to costume design?
Well, I think, of course, they have to function. I mean, the actors have to be able to move. They can't be restricted. Hitchcock said there's no such thing as a good actor, only comfortable shoes. Well, I feel if you're in a bad costume that doesn't move with your body and feel part of you, then you fail, because how can they act? They're always, always feeling they have to adjust themselves. So my feeling is that there are great actors and you don't want to get in their way with the costume. And I've always felt that the costume was the bridge from the actor to the character. And that's the first place they really, of course, they've read the script and have their take on the character. But once they put the costume on, then they really become that character. And you want to dress them from the inside out. So I feel that form is really, really important. If you've done your job, a good actor will change how they stand when they put that on. One of the first people who put on the still suit was Timothy, and he moved differently in it. He's very languid and, fluid in his movements, and he became a warrior. And he moved like, a tough guy. And he transformed. And Jeffrey Rush did it once when I was doing quills with him, when he's the same way. He's very fluid in his body movements, almost like rubber. He's like he has no bones. And he put on the marquee costume that I'd done for him, and he started walking around the castle where we were shooting, and he was so magnificent and erect and regal. He became a marquis. And so that was one of my first lessons in that. When you see an actor move and stand differently, and they're no way restricted, but they can let their inner marquis or inner Paul Atreides take over in the costume, and it comes through in their motions and in how they look, how they stand and how they behave, then you've kind of hit it. So as far as function, like the still suits, they had to run and climb those dunes and fly through the air and fight and do all these things in those. And they had to definitely move with their bodies. And you had to also believe that their bodies, their musculature provided the pumping action, which mechanizes the suit. So it's, there's no LEDs in that suit. It's or remotes. It really has to, the audience has to believe that the liquids are pumped through and the gases are pumped around the body to those holding sacs and through a series of valves and tubing, all motivated and, functioning because of the body's musculature. That's why we made them very form-fitting. But with all of that, Frank Herbert describes it so perfectly. That was an easy one. Once we had the drawing and the coloration and everything that Denis was happy with, that was a manufacturing feat. But the individual soft costumes really became a real design thing. I felt like I was working in a couture shop, not only for the women, but I had a magnificent tailor, Gabor, for the men. And I think he's going to come back and for Dune 2, I hope.
Amazing. Cannot wait to see that. And with regards to, the legacy of a film or a film series like this, especially let's say the science fiction genre, whether it's a movie, whether it's a book or any other form of medium, stories told in the form of science fiction have a tendency to inspire the whole science fields in time, and science fiction essentially sometimes turns into science fact. And how do you feel about potentially, like, way down the line, a suit, a real functioning suit like the Fremen sail suit?
I don't think that's that far off. I mean, the Japanese have been working on that kind of stuff for years. And Dune was a prophecy, don't forget. Frank Herbert wrote it in the Bay Area, where I'm from, in the 60s, and it was a Bible. It was an absolute Bible. Everybody read it. It was sold at the Whole Earth Access store. Everyone had one in their book bag. And it was a prophecy about, it was geophysical. It was about the raping of the Middle East. I remember that there was a bumper stickers in Berkeley who put our oil under their sand as a, ironic bumper sticker a la Berkeley. And it was political, it was geophysical, it was raping the Middle East of all the oil by, colonists. And it was also about us depleting our environment, robbing everything from the planet's resources without putting anything back, or without any kind of sustainable plan. And this last year with COVID, which I think is definitely has to do with global warming and, all of the animals, having to retreat their real environments into populated places. And I think all the fires and all the droughts around the world, that it'll be sooner rather than later. I felt this last the year before, the summer before, that people were going to need still suits in Los Angeles. So I think that some kind of ode to the still suit will make it to the runway very soon.
Well, if that were the case, I'd probably be in line to purchase one, because whenever I come to LA during the summer, I'm like, yeah, I need one of those.
Gasping for air, right? Although I was mentioning to my husband, the air in Los Angeles, I live up in Santa Monica Hills, just below Mulholland, and it's so clear. I can see to the San Gabriels now. It used to always be this layer of brown over the valley, over the San Fernando Valley, and now it's so clear. You can see every little crag of the mountains over there, just like in detail. It looks like a Cezanne painting over there. And you never used to hardly be able to see the San Gabriels from the Santa Monicas across the valley. So I don't know, maybe that one good thing will come out of COVID, less people on the road, or it's all of the Teslas in Los Angeles.
Probably might be that, or a combination of everything.
Yeah.
But final question. we were just talking about the whole legacy of like costumes like this ending up influencing science fiction influencing science fact. What do you want people to take away from the costume design aspect, not just from Dune, but from all the films that you've done? Like, what do you want? What would you prefer the audience understanding more of?
Well, I listened to two women in my career, and the first one was three women, I would say. The first is Anais Nin, and she said every choice of everything somebody puts on should be a reflection of their inner riches. Even a hanky in their purse, the choice of that hanky, a pair of shoes that a woman picks, a tie that a man picks, the cut of a suit that a guy chooses, to wear out of the house. Everything should reveal the inner riches of the character. So because I was a fashion designer, and Phil Kaufman asked me to come and do Henry and June, and I told my husband, I'm a thoroughly modern Millie, and he said, you are a fashion person. My mother was a fashion designer, high fashion, couture. And he said, clothes better than anyone I know. He said, you just take them shopping in whatever period the film is, and then nothing will stand out. And only pick for them what they would pick for themselves. Get to the inside of the character. Peel all the onion skin layers away and dress them from the inside out, and they'll make their own choices for your costumes. So I've always lived by that. And also Edith Head, who always reminded everyone, if they go away from the movie remembering too much about the costumes, you failed. They should blend in with the whole mise en scene film.
100%. Jacky, thank you so much for taking the time to do this session. This has been really enlightening, and we are so looking forward to doing part 2 and everything else that you do down the line. And special thanks to Vianne for hosting this session, and also to Vanessa and everyone at Warner Brothers for facilitating this entire episode.